Please forgive the voice today. I'm coming off of an illness. My body caught a virus. That's the best tech joke I can do today, sorry. So now we've got two Apple Pro devices to compare. One that has a complete touchscreen, one with a single strip of a touchscreen. Which one is a better worth for your money? Now these things are fairly hard to compare because there's such a large gap between the two of them. The starting price of the new MacBook Pro with the touch bar is $1,800. Whereas if you want something that's not the touch bar model, even this one with regular function keys is gonna set you back $1,500. Whereas the iPad Pro, if you wanna go for that smaller size, can be as cheap as $600. A third the price. So both of them run totally different operating systems, iOS and macOS. They work really well together, but in terms of interface and app support, very, very different. Both made by Apple though, so they're both great. No complaints there. And I know many of you out there are wondering, should I save all the way up for a MacBook Pro or should I just get an iPad? So let's start thinking about those differences. With the iPad, you're not getting a physical keyboard with the purchase. For that physical keyboard, you're gonna have to be spending close to $180 on the smart cover one, or if you just want a regular Bluetooth keyboard, you can do that too, but either way, you're going to be spending some more money. As I've said in the past, a lot of you, if you would just try the virtual keyboard on the iPad Pro for a month, you could type just as fast on that as you could any other keyboard. It's not that hard to get used to. It's just people don't like to change the way they do things. But if you absolutely need that physical keyboard, it's going to set you back something. How about we compare some specs then? Both of these have PCIe-based solid-state storage, as in transfer speeds are very, very fast and boot ups are quick. But with the iPad's low starting price, you're also getting a low storage configuration. If you're getting that cheap iPad Pro, you're getting 32 gigs of storage. You're gonna run out on that. It's just a matter of time, maybe a couple months, but pretty much everyday consumers will fill that up easily. Where the MacBook Pro starts at 256 gigabytes of storage, which is going to support you just fine for quite a while. If you're an average consumer, photos and videos are gonna take a couple years to fill all that up, unless you take maybe more than usual. If you're a professional video editor, you're definitely gonna be buying an external hard drive for that. But the iPad Pro can now go all the way up to 256 gigabytes if you configure it. You're going to be paying for it, but that's quite a lot for a tablet. So if you're getting the 9.7-inch iPad Pro, that'll be $800, and if you're getting the 12.9-inch iPad Pro, that'll be $1,000. Now, in terms of speed, which one is faster? It's hard to give this a real-life test because there's not really a professional app on both that we can compare exporting speeds to, but we have Geekbench, and we can see that the MacBook Pro obviously takes the lead both in the single-core and multi-core benchmarks, though both of these have dual cores. But the major difference is that the MacBook Pro comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM standard, whereas the iPad Pro, you get 4 gigabytes if you have the 12.9-inch version and 2 gigabytes if you have the 9.7-inch version. But here's the thing about RAM on the iPad. You can't really have a ton of windows open on iOS. You can run 2 apps at once, maybe picture-in-picture at the same time, so like 3 activities, that's about it. None of them are usually very high processing powered. I have never had a RAM crash on the iPad Pro. That's very rare occasion, as in maybe never. Whereas the MacBook Pro, you can have several desktops running at the same time, external monitors, tons of windows on each monitor. You're gonna need that 8 gigabytes of RAM. But with all the time I've had with the MacBook Pro, just the regular function key version, I've never had a crash because of too many apps running at the same time. And I run a lot of stuff. I've been exporting in Premiere, running Messages, iTunes, Steam, Safari, all running at the same time, and I've never got that alert that says too much at once. No, it's handling it just fine. Keep in mind, you tech geeks out there, with macOS, the system automatically investigates with macOS, the system automatically is looking for which programs need more RAM than others, and which one do you use more often, and will then divide the RAM unevenly so that the more processor-intensive apps, those get more RAM than the basic ones. In other words, 8 gigabytes of RAM on macOS performs much better than 8 gigabytes on Windows 10 because of smart sharing. Now, in terms of design, I think they're both very beautiful, but in terms of portability and design, the iPad Pro is a steal. It is way, way lighter, with the 9.7-inch version being less than a pound, and the 12.9-inch version being a pound and a half. Basically nothing. It adds no weight to your bag if you're throwing it in to go somewhere. Even when you're adding some accessories to it, it doesn't weigh much at all. Whereas the MacBook Pro is definitely the lightest it's ever been, but it's got some obvious weight to it the first time you unbox it. It's not like the 12-inch MacBook, which is just like insanely light where it feels like you're not holding anything. The MacBook Pro has some weight, you can tell. So in terms of portability, the iPad wins that hands down. Now, I've compared the speakers on both of them very, very closely. It's a real close one. I can't really tell. It's very hard to tell which one is louder. However, the iPad speakers are not pointed at you, whereas on the MacBook Pro, the speakers are actually facing you. So when you're holding the iPad, sometimes your hands can be covering up the speakers. It's actually louder if you hold it sideways and point it at you. So it's a close one, but I think the MacBook Pro has a slight lead in the speaker department. Now, ironically, neither of them have MagSafe, but they also both have a headphone jack. So, you be the judge of that information. I never talk about battery life, so why don't I here? The MacBook Pro's battery life is fairly diverse depending on what you're doing. When editing in Adobe Premiere, depending on what you're editing, it can shrink down to 2 or 3 hours, usually when you're exporting. But when you're on the web, just browsing social media and stuff, it's usually 8 to 9 hours. Yeah, it's not quite as good as it's advertised on the site. They say you can get to 10 hours of playback. They probably turned the brightness all the way down, turned on the backlit, turned off the touch bar or whatever. It's not the greatest battery life in the world. Whereas the iPad Pro lasts long amounts of time. Usually no matter what you're doing, it has a solid 10 hours. So if you're bringing your MacBook Pro with you, expect to be packing your charger as well. Whereas when I'm taking my iPad Pro different places, I never really worry about bringing the charger with me. It lasts all day very easily. The counter to that, however, is the MacBook Pro charges very, very quickly. With its USB-C power brick that has 61 watts outage, that charges up the MacBook, even when it's doing intensive stuff, fairly quickly, usually 2 hours or so. Where the iPad Pro, with the charger it comes with, takes a bit longer to charge. It's a pretty slow process. It's gonna take 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours. Whereas if you buy a USB-C to Lightning cable in a different power outlet, like the one they ship with the 12-inch MacBook, now your iPad Pro is going to charge much, much faster. So there's a little trade-off there. Both very different, but both have their own advantage. Both displays are beautiful, and I can't really tell which one is brighter and which one has the better pixels, because at an average distance, you can't see the pixels on the display anyway. We could measure them down and look at PPI, but there's no point. They're both great. It's a tie there. In terms of gaming, the MacBook Pro is kind of in a weird place because it can handle some Mac Steam games, nothing too graphically impressive, but it can handle some stuff. You know, Counter-Strike Go, Portal 2, Team Fortress, simple games. Whereas the iPad Pro has a massive library of not very graphically impressive games, but lots of free games. On the iOS App Store, there are tons of apps. A lot of them are games that look great on the iPad Pro, and again, much cheaper than what you'll find on the Mac OS. And again, much cheaper than what you'll find for your Mac. When it comes to app support, this is, I think, the biggest difference between the two. With the MacBook Pro, it is a desktop-designed OS, so you're getting decades of app support we've had in the past, and lots of professional apps, of course, work with it. Adobe Creative Cloud, Apple's Pro apps, as in Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro, you know, an unlimited supply of online third-party apps that have been here for a long time. Whereas the iPad has a very new app store in terms of the grand scheme of things, and those apps are very minimalistic and very basic. There's not a whole lot for professional use. Back when I bought my iPad Pro, I was hoping there would be this new wave of video editing apps that would come to it because it had the processing power for it. That never really happened, and that's why I'm investing in this new MacBook Pro. I need something that's more professional. Now, I should answer the common question, is it redundant to own both an iPad Pro and a MacBook Pro? At times, sure. Yeah, you can basically do everything the iPad can on the Mac other than, you know, Apple Pencil and drawing and stuff. When it comes to consuming media, you can do everything on the Mac just as easy as the iPad. But after owning both of them for a while, I've noticed they've both found their own unique place. I find the MacBook Pro really great for when I need to get work done, but when I want to consume media, I usually switch over to the iPad. The OS is a lot more simplified so you can get to things faster, and the apps are a lot more optimized, as in they take up the whole display and they're way easier to manage because you can just touch them. That means watching videos, browsing Twitter, Facebook, going on YouTube, whatever. The iPad is usually better and more efficient at that than the Mac. It's also great having both when your Mac is busy exporting something. It's sucking up all its battery, so you don't want to throw more on top of that. So usually when it's doing something like that, I'll switch over to my iPad because that has a great battery life, and that's when I usually start texting people and doing all the media consumption. So having both is great, but it's really only for people who have, you know, tons of money to spend. It's a huge luxury, and it's not really a requirement. Yes, you can buy one of these and not the other and get by just fine. So no, I don't really call it redundant. It would be redundant if you weren't a professional and all you did was watch stuff. Then yeah, it would kind of be pointless. But I use my technology for all kinds of things, both for work and play, and for someone like me, that makes a lot of sense. So at the end of the day, which is the better buy? They're both really great at what they do, and I think in a lot of categories, they're basically tied. So at the end of the day, I'm gonna have to say price is the final factor here, and that's why I'm giving it to the iPad, just for its customization and for the fact that it's so much cheaper. When it is cheaper, you have all this extra cash lying around to spend on making it a better product overall, whether you're buying a smart keyboard or an Apple Pencil, or spending that extra money to have the most storage possible. It has the rear-facing camera, it's lighter. Now, it's not the best for professional use, but I'm assuming all you professionals out there already know that. You guys already know what you need in terms of consuming power. For a lot of you, it's very simple like me. I need Adobe Premiere. That is not on the iPad. Case closed. But I know a lot of you out there are students, whether you be in high school, college, whatever. I think the iPad Pro is a better buy for you if you're making, you know, PowerPoint presentations, or if you're writing essays and looking up research and stuff like that. Back when I was in college, I had much better luck with the iPad Pro just for how optimized everything was. Everything was very fluent, and I felt very efficient using it in class. Hope that made sense to all of you. This is your Apple Sheep here, and I will see you in the next one.
For that amount of money, I could make a gaming desktop that could do
Wait, who's that? Who's
more than anything a Mac ever could. I could get the GTX.
Wait, you can make a
VR, which is why it's more amazing, you idiot.
You could make a gaming PC with that money?
2 1080p monitors.
Oh my god, I didn't know that. Never mind, never buy those again.
In GTA 5, everything in 4K.
I had no idea you could buy that. It's cheaper to make your own gaming PC. What?
Another Google Pixel phone because that's.
I didn't know this. Why did no one tell me? Screw this crap. Everyone immediately buy a gaming PC that you can't take with you because it'll have a great GPU and even VR support. That's better. Oh my god.